إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تعالى في كتاب الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وعن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم قال ألا كلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته فالإمام الذي على الناس راع وهو مسؤول عن رعيته والرجل راع على أهل بيته وهو مسؤول عن رعيته والمرأة راعية على أهل بيته زوجها وولده وهي مسؤولة عنهم وعبد الرجل راع على مال سيده وهو مسؤول عنه ألا فكلكم راع وكلكم مسؤول عن رعيته. أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. أما بعد. All praise and due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guiding us to this path of Islam and allowing us the honor to call ourselves Muslims. And all praise are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for allowing us the opportunity to see the paradise that He has prepared for us. And all praise are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sending us His last and final beloved messenger Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam as the mercy to all mankind. In this narration, brothers and sisters, that I began with, the Prophet ﷺ makes an analogy for us to better understand our place within the world. And not to say the broader world, but rather in our own little worlds. The Prophet ﷺ says that all of you are shepherds. Every single individual is a shepherd. And he lays the groundwork for an analogy. Because a shepherd is responsible for his flock. The animals that are within his care, whoever's they might be, he is responsible for them. Where they go, how they eat, what happens with them. If the milk is good that comes from them. The shepherd is responsible for what is going on with the animal. And this is a trust from the master of the sheep or the animals, and from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our families. With all the things that we have been given custodianship of in our lives, this is a responsibility, a trust that has been given from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the Prophet ﷺ says, the Imam of the people, the one who has been made an Imam, he is responsible for the people that follow him. The ones that are behind him in Salah, the ones that people come to him seeking answers from, he is responsible for those people and he will be asked about them. Those people who are put into his care, the ones who were trusting him to do the job that he was put in place for, he is responsible for them. And he will be asked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala about. And then the one that's pertinent, the one that's relevant to most of us. A man is responsible for his home. And he will be asked about the affairs of his home. A woman is responsible for the home, for her son's home, for her daughter's home. She is responsible for her family's home. And she will be asked about it. Now, the relevance here, brothers and sisters, is not lost on us, I'm sure. All of us feel a responsibility to those under our care. Whether it's our son or daughter, whether it's our wives, we feel a responsibility. We know that I am responsible for making sure that clothes are on their back. I, as a man, am responsible for making sure they have a roof over their heads. I am responsible for making sure that their deen is in order. For making sure that their deen is in order. And by Allah, brothers and sisters, this is the most important task that a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, a mother and a father are responsible for. By Allah, these are the most important things. And the last one, whether their deen is straight or not, that is the greatest that we will be asked about. Because at the end of the day, brothers and sisters, the rizq that we received in this life, it was from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The rizq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set aside for us in this life, it was already preordained.
how it was going to come to us. All these things were our responsibility. But it was already preordained. It was already set in stone that this much was going to come for this person, and that much for this person. But the one thing that's key for us, our sons and daughters, our wives, our husbands. Where is their Islam? Where is their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Because when we look at it and we really truly consider, there's an example of Umar radiallahu anhu when he was the Khalifa. And a man came to him and he said that my son is disobedient, he's not listening to me. So Umar radiallahu anhu told him to bring his son. And so he said to him that, oh boy, why don't you listen to your father? And the boy said, my father, don't I have some rights? His first question to Amir al-Mu'mineen, don't I have some rights from my father? He says, yes. And he says, well, tell me what they are. Your father should pick a good mother for you. Your father should pick a good name for you. And your father should teach you the Quran. And this young man says, wallahi, my father hasn't given me any of those things. My mother was some prostitute that he had an affair of relations with, and he took me in because of it. He has given me a name that is one of the ugliest names, and he has not taught me a letter of the Quran. Umar radiallahu anhu, he looked at the man and he said, how dare you come to me complaining your son isn't fulfilling his rights to you when you haven't fulfilled the rights to him. The rights of a child exist, brothers and sisters. In our society today, it's so easy to look at them and say that, no, you know what, they're a kid, they don't know any better. No, they have rights, brothers and sisters. And the last one, teaching them the Quran, this is not just simply alif ba ta. This is living as the Prophet ﷺ. Because the Prophet ﷺ, as Aisha radiallahu anha told us, he was a living Quran. That is what teaching the Quran to our children is about. And brothers and sisters, in our day and age now, the knee-jerk reaction when we hear something like this, how are we going to react? No, I need to make sure my kids follow Islam. I need to make sure that my family is doing things properly, the Islamic way. The knee-jerk reaction is, why aren't there events going on? The knee-jerk reaction is, drop my kid off at the masjid, and they're here, and this masjid has some spiritual aura, it'll affect them, and now, mashallah, they'll be great Muslims. Drop them at Sunday school, I'm not responsible for anything now after that. Right? Sunday school teaches them Islam. That's the knee-jerk reaction, brothers and sisters. But it's not founded in any logic. It's not founded in any thought process that's coherent. It's just a simple deflection of responsibility. Well, I don't think I can do it, so guess what? I'm going to pass it off to someone else. That is not how we raise our children, brothers and sisters. But that's the knee-jerk reaction. And so the question now is that what's the way forward? What's the way forward? Because the easy way, again, is to jump to that reaction. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "At-ta'anni min Allahi wal-'ijlatu min ash-shaytan." That to have some kind of sabr, to have some kind of thought process, think things through, that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Al-'ijla, to rush into things head first, blindly, that's from shaytan. So for us, the response, the answer is not that we simply say, you know what, I just need to drop them off at the masjid. I just need to do this, I just need to do that. No. The response is, let's talk about this. Let's think things through in a rational, coherent way. Because guaranteed, if a problem arises in your job, you're not trying to go for the knee-jerk reaction. When somebody does something wrong, and you just try to throw something over it quickly to fix it, most of us have realized by now that that's just some tape you're putting over a wound. It doesn't actually fix anything. To fix the problem, you have to dive deeply. You have to get to a point where you actually understand what's going on. So how do we understand? Very clearly, brothers and sisters, the easy and the first answer for us is the Sunnah. The Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. But not just how we think of the Sunnah. While that's important, what is more important is understanding what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say about the Sunnah. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reference the Sunnah in the Quran? When He talks about the Sunnah, what does He say? هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He is the one who sent the unlettered ones, a prophet from them, who recites Allah's verses, Allah's signs into them. He purifies them. He teaches them the book and the wisdom, hikmah. يُعَلِّمُهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْحِكْمَةِ. The scholars say that hikmah here refers to sunnah. It refers to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And what is the hikmah? What is the translation of hikmah? We say in English wisdom. But in Arabic, how do the scholars translate it? وَضَعَ الشَّيْء فِي مَحَلِّهِ. Hikmah, wisdom, is putting something in its proper place. It's mind-blowing how simple that explanation is. Putting something in its proper place. Dealing with something according to its station, to its position. وَضَعَ الشَّيْء فِي مَحَلِّهِ. That's wisdom. That is hikmah. The opposite of hikmah, وَضَعَ الشَّيْء فِي غَيْرِ مَحَلِّهِ. ظُلم, as the scholars say. Putting something in other than its place. That is dhulm. As we call it in English, oppression. And why do I mention this, brothers and sisters? Because we need to simply not just say, oh, this is the case, that's the case, from my very basic understanding. I see on TV the kids are doing this. I read news reports, the kids are doing that. I see that everybody is saying this and that. No, that is not how you build understanding, brothers and sisters. Understanding is not built through simply hearing, oh, this is what someone said. That's what this news report says. وَضَعَ الشَّيْء فِي مَحَلِّهِ. Understanding exactly where something goes. And in order to understand where something goes, you have to know where it comes from. As we tell our children, when you take something, put it back where you found it. Right? In the same vein, brothers and sisters. In the very same vein, if we're going to put things in their proper place, we have to know where they came from. We have to know where they came from. And so why is this relevant to our children? In particular, I'm going to focus heavily on our children. Because the reality is, brothers and sisters, that the kids right now, the Muslim kids right across the street in Flower Mound High School, are sitting in a classroom and they're being told about this and that. And their friends are telling them how about they're doing this and the other thing. And their thought process is, well, that's haram, I can't do that. But then their friends look at them, aren't you American just like us? Why aren't you doing things like everybody else does? So guess what? On one hand, if they do those things, they're not Muslim enough. On the other hand, if they don't do other things, they're not quote-unquote American enough. So literally what we have is our youth today are being pulled apart in two separate directions. Why aren't you more American? Why aren't you more Muslim? Why didn't you go to the masjid? Why didn't you come to the party? Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. It's exhausting. With a young mind that, mind you, not only is already dealing with its own problems, dealing with zits, dealing with constantly changing emotions, dealing with the fact that they're getting taller, things are happening to their body they don't understand. And couple all of that now with their parents telling them, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? Their friends telling them, why don't you do this, why don't you do that? Imagine that. Imagine the toll that's going to take on their minds. وَضْعَ الشَّيْءِ فِي مَحَلِّهِ. You know what that tells me? How we deal with them with wisdom? We don't try to tell them that you're not doing this right, you're not doing that right, you're not doing this right. You try to just meet them in the middle somewhere. You know what? I know your friends are having a party and they're doing this and that. But there's this really great thing going on at the masjid. They're having this event over there. Why don't you go check that out instead? I think it'd be a lot of fun. And not just that, not only just dropping them off, but then making sure that they're somewhat engaged. Making sure that there's somebody there who's going to take care of them. Who's going to connect with them. And not just leaving them to their own devices. Because you know what, brothers and sisters? we might want to look at this society here. And right here in this little bubble of Texas, of Dallas, we might be in the Christian capital of America. So maybe there's some things that aren't happening that would happen otherwise. Maybe there's some discussions not happening that would be happening elsewhere. But the moment your son or daughter picks up their cell phone, the moment they pick that little thing up, they're connected to the entire rest of the world. And they're talking, and they're seeing conversations about atheism. They're seeing conversations about this and that. They're seeing conversations of, oh, actually, this is actually acceptable in Islam, when it's clearly not. And they don't have anywhere to go. And when they want to get those questions answered, why are they going to go to the masjid? It's a natural kid's defiance that they just want to do what their parents tell them not to do. Why aren't you going to the masjid? I'm not going to the masjid. Why aren't you studying? I'm not studying right now. Just because you said so. When we talk about our youth, brothers and sisters, we have to talk about them with hikmah, not just complaining. And to finish with that, we have to never ever forget that kids are very much monkey see, monkey do. Excuse the analogy, but that's just the facts. If a kid sees their parents dropping them off at the masjid and going right back home, what does that tell them? What does that say to them? Their parents are ready for them to go, but they're not ready to come themselves. You need to go and do this and do what I tell you, but don't do what I do. Don't just drop someone off and then leave at the masjid. No, you need to stay at the masjid. Why? Why? And that's the question. And the reason I stand here today mentioning all these points, brothers and sisters, is because we have spent so much time, not just this community, but every community, ignoring the problems and the reality that exists for our youth today. And rather than simply accepting responsibility, rather than taking accountability with ourselves, first and foremost, doing muhasabah internally, we're looking to blame the young generation. The kids today, they're just so different. They just do things this way and that way. Well, guess what? Ali radiallahu anh said, don't raise your kids according to how you were raised. Because they're born in a different time. They're meant for a different time. They're not meant to be raised with a chappal in one hand and a belt in the other. It's not how it's supposed to be. And that's the reality of it. And really, when you talk about how we connect to them, the answer is simple, although it's not easy. It's simple as a concept, but it's not easy to execute. And it goes for any human being, because it's rooted in science. It comes down and it boils down to the why. And I want everybody to reflect on this for a moment. How many times when telling our children that they need to pray salah, have we explained to them why they need to pray salah? How many times when telling our kids they should read more Quran, have we told them what the benefit, what the fa'idah of reading more Quran is? And how many times when we talk about Jannah and Jahannam, and generally it's Jahannam, how many times do we tell them why they need to be afraid of it? Why they need to hope for it? More often than not, brothers and sisters, it's just do this because I said so. That's not going to work with anyone. Science tells us. They break down the brain into 3 parts. Really 2 parts. You have this outer part called the neocortex. That's responsible for your language. That's responsible for your rational thought, your analytical thought. But then you have the limbic area of the brain. And that section of your brain has no capacity for language. Meaning you can't speak to that part of the brain. But that's the part of the brain that feels emotions, trust, love, happiness. That's the part of the brain that feels those emotions. And it is the part of the brain responsible for decision making. That's why you're going to see some people who you can present every single logical point to them. What you're looking to do is this is how you can accomplish it, and this is what you need to do to get to that point. And they'll say, yeah, but I just don't really feel that that's right. Like, I gave you everything. Yeah, but I just don't feel right about it. You know why? That decision-making part of their brain, the language isn't connected. It's not connected to that part. It's connected to their emotions, to their feelings, to their qalb. لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. Allah says. They have hearts that they don't think with. That part of the brain, brothers and sisters, that's where you speak to someone. That's how you get someone to do something. With emotions. With the why. Because I can tell you, brother, pray salah. Sister, read Quran. Brother, wear a topi. And you know that that's true. You know that it's right. But if I tell you something broader, if I say to you, wouldn't you like that you're going to be sitting in Jannah one day with a nice couch, relaxed, doing nothing? Wouldn't you be happy if I could promise you that if you just stay away from this stuff, you're going to have more happiness than you've ever experienced in your life? And now I'm breaking it down. Now I'm showing it in a way that you suddenly start thinking about it. Like, yeah, I would like that. Yeah, I do want that. And then you're like, you know what? Why don't I do that? That's your thought process. That's your decision-making process. It's connected to the hearts, brothers and sisters. Because really, that's where we make our decisions from. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide all of our hearts. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين واستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. فقال النبي الكريم صلى الله تعالى عليه وسلم الدنيا سجنة المؤمن وجنة الكافر أو كما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام أما بعد. Brothers, please scoot up, inshallah, make room for those who are in the back. This is why, brothers and sisters, there are so many ahadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not simply say, you should want to go to Jannah, you should want to do this. He says, أَلَا أَدُلُّكُمْ? Should I not direct you towards something? Should I not point something out to you that if you do this thing, guess what it's going to do for you? It's going to bring you happiness. It's going to make you content. It's going to enter you into Jannah. This is how the Prophet ﷺ spoke to me. And the prophetic method, brothers and sisters, is nothing if not perfection in this dunya. The Prophet ﷺ was sent to the people, and the people knew him, and they understood him, and he understood them. Brothers and sisters, let's take a deep look at our own people here in this society. The ones that our kids right now are in school with, mingling with. A society that is consistently increasing not in faith, but in atheism. A society that is increasingly materialistic, and focusing and more becoming focused on things that don't matter. And worst of all, a society that is increasingly about the haves and the have-nots. This wealth and income disparity. That's the society that we live in. And nobody likes to talk about it because it doesn't feel good to recognize problems. But as they say, the first step to solving any problem is recognizing that there is one. Recognizing that there is a problem. When you want to get to a point where you are as a parent whom the Prophet ﷺ spoke about, when he said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ يَرْفَعُ الدَّرَجَةَ لِلْعَبْدِ الصَّالِحِ فِي الْجَنَّةِ فَيَقُولُ يَا رَبِّ أَنَّ لِي هَذِي. You want to be like the parent who is in Jannah and has been raised to a higher level of Jannah. And when that person asks, oh Allah, why have I been raised to this higher level of Jannah? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, دُعَاءُ وَلَدِكَ لَكَ. because of the dua of your child for you. Is there any parent who would say they don't want to be that parent? No parent would say that. Is there any child that would say that they want to be like Allah, like the Prophet ﷺ tells us, they want to be the recipient of one of the three du'as that are always accepted, which is the du'a of a parent for the child? Nobody would say no. Of course you want to have someone make du'a for you, that du'a will be accepted. I stand here in front of you, brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah, having joined this community specifically to address these issues. Specifically to work towards alleviating some of these problems. It is not going to be an easy road. We need to understand that there is a lot of resentment within youth. Because when they look at their parents and they hear things like, why don't you do this, why don't you go to the masjid, why aren't you Muslim enough, they're naturally just going to be upset. They're naturally just going to feel something in their hearts. Maybe when they're older, they'll understand why you were saying what you were saying. But that's not a guarantee if they're not on the path of Islam. And everything around them is telling them Islam is wrong. Everything around them is telling them Islam is wrong. Fox News, Islam is this. CNN, Muslims did this. Everybody else in school, why do Muslims do that? Why do you have to do this? Why don't you eat pork? Everything in this society tells these kids that Islam is wrong. So what's the solution? Hikmah, brothers and sisters. Coming and meeting these kids halfway. Not coming to them and saying, hey, why haven't you done this? Why aren't you going to this thing? No, giving them opportunities. Building positive connections. Just from a psychological perspective, if a child can come to the masjid, boy or girl, and feel that they're comfortable here, feel that no one's going to say something to them that makes their self-esteem drop, which is already a problem. Feel that they can come here and have a good time. If they have those feelings in their hearts, brothers and sisters, where do you think they're going to go in their worst moments? Do you think they're just going to go to the club? Do you think they're just going to go to a party when they feel down? Positive correlations. And if we build those positive correlations, brothers and sisters, that's how we get them here. And that's what the goal is. The goal is to let our youth be in the masjid. Let our youth love this masjid like it is their home. To have our youth be of those who are shaded on the day of judgment by Allah's shade. Because they have heart, they have a connection and love to a house of Allah. That's what any and all of us would want. But the answer to that, the solution to that, one part is me, inshaAllah. But the next part, brothers and sisters, is us. And that's the main part. This is not a one-man job. This is not for me to simply put on my shoulders and do everything and everybody say, MashaAllah. This is all of us. I need every single person in this room and beyond to be a part of this journey. I need brothers and sisters to be coming when we have halaqat for adults, so that the kids can see that their parents are at the masjid too. They don't need to come when you come. Not every single time. You don't need to drag them. But they should see that you're making an effort to come for Isha. You're making an effort to come for Maghrib. To come for the halaqas that are just for you. Right? This is a partnership, brothers and sisters. And what I'd like to finish with is the words of Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. When he took a position of public trust. And for time's sake, I just want to say the translation. Because this is all that I feel. I have been given authority over you, and I am not the best of you. If I do well, help me. And if I do wrong, set me right. Sincere regard for truth is loyalty, and disregard for truth is treachery. The weak amongst you will be strong with me until I have secured his rights. And the strong amongst you will be weak with me until I have taken from him the rights of others. Obey me so long as I obey Allah and His Messenger. But if I disobey Allah and His Messenger, you owe me no obedience. This is what I finish with, brothers and sisters. And I ask you for your assistance in this monumental task, because this is not a one-man job. This is not a me job. This is a we job. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide all of our hearts. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless this community. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless the youth of this community. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us to all enter into His paradise. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما صليت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى ال محمد كما باركت على ابراهيم وعلى ال ابراهيم انك حميد مجيد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا انفسنا وان لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا تقبل منا انك انت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا انك انت التواب الرحيم. عباد الله ان الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله الذي يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم واتقوه يجعل لكم من امركم مخرجا. وقم الصلاه.